Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of The Free Mind, the television show that helps to show you the way to live a better life by freeing your mind from all the extraneous influences that try to deter us every day. This is the third show in a series, and the purpose of the show today is more to dwell on what the future can hold. Not so much looking at what's wrong with existence today, but how with a free mind we can look ahead and do better in the future and free ourselves from all the influences that try to get us to behave in a certain way or get us to give up certain freedoms or otherwise detract from our happiness. I've made some notes since the last show, and some of what I say may refer to the previous one. If you haven't seen it, I'll try to fill it in. But just to put things in perspective, I like to do the show out here in nature. There's still possibly some wind noise. You can hear the insects, possibly an occasional cow. But I think that having the show out here puts it in the perspective of relaxing ourselves and being able to think more of what the basics are and detract ourselves from the materialism and the other things that make up our day-to-day life. One of the things I wanted to talk about, there's an old story about this guy that has a pain, and he goes to the first doctor and he says, doctor, every time I do this it hurts. And the doctor gets some x-rays and does a CAT scan and all kinds of tests and can't find anything wrong. So he prescribes some medicine. Well, the medicine doesn't help. The guy goes to the second doctor. He says, doctor, every time I do this, it hurts. Well, the doctor says, I got to send you to a specialist. We got to think about surgery. And they go through a bunch of more tests and can't find anything wrong with it. They're going to cut him open and do some more surgery. Well, before they do that, the guy goes to a third doctor that he'd heard about, whose methods were a little unorthodox. He goes to this doctor. He says, doctor, it hurts every time I do this. And the doctor says, and he gets out a stethoscope and his little rubber hammer and he does some pushes here and pushes there. And he says, well, I've got the answer. The guy says, well, what's the answer? He says, don't do this. Well, there's some truth in that. That there are things in life that cause us pain. And yet we sometimes keep doing them over and over again. And I think the trick is to find out what the this is, the this, that causes us pain, and stop doing it or do something different. And sometimes it's a real trick to find out what the this is that causes us pain. But that's what one of the things that this show is about, is to enable us to look more objectively at our life and try to determine the things that cause pleasure and the things that cause pain, and to try to do more of the pleasure things and fewer of the pain things. These aren't necessarily in any kind of logical order. Things occur to me and I write them down. This little booklet, I've had this notebook since my college days. There's a lot of college type comments written in here, like down with virginity and things like that, but there's some other things over the years that I've added in here that might have a little more value. One of the things in life that help us live more objectively and more consciously, I believe, is to call things what they are. Now, this is a trick, especially today, that government uses, or politicians, let's say, because when I talk about government, I'm talking about the people that seek power through government, not the civil servants, which I used to be one, who are just there doing a job. I'm talking about the people that try to get the rest of society to do things a certain way, who try to carve out power for themselves, who try to get other people to do their bidding. Those are the people I'm talking about when I'm talking about government. But those people tend to redefine things like peacekeeper missiles, Operation Just Cause. They come up with a lot of descriptive terms that say what they want you to, how they want you to think about something, rather than what it really is. Well, it even goes to when you're on the on the freeway and you see a sign that says speed zone. It's not a speed zone, it's a slow zone. So many things don't have the right name. Postal Service, Internal Revenue Service. Another one I like is Immigration and Naturalization Service. It's really the non-immigration and non-naturalization service, because if it wasn't for them or the laws that brought them about, you wouldn't need them. Anybody could be a citizen. Now, that's another subject some people may want to discuss, but basically many things in life aren't what they say they are or what their name says they are. And one of the things that a free mind must do is to sift those things out and determine what the real descriptions are of these things. Okay, here's another one slightly different, and this kind of describes what this show is intended to be, and that is for us to strive to the highest and best use of our life. I get that term really from real estate. That's how, in fact, how real estate taxes are applied in some states to some real estate. The appraiser goes out and you may be using it as a garbage dump, but if an office building could be there, they'll tax it at the highest and best use that they see. Well, I think you can apply that to your life and make your life the highest and best use of your time. We need to aspire to a society, a world in which people's innate thinking leads to a good society, where people, and I think in general people want to do good. I don't think people, sane people at least, want to do harm to each other. And maybe that's the definition, or one of the definitions of sanity, but normally I think people want to do good. They want to see other people smile. They want to smile. And I think because of that very nugget of human decency, I think we are headed in a good direction. Because let's face it, if we're in a society where every individual has rights and every individual has pleasure, then society has pleasure, and society is good. So I think it starts with the individual. If individuals can gang up on each other, and I can say, these three people, their rights are more important than my one rights, if you can add those up, then people can bully each other into doing things or not doing things or giving up property or rights. And I think that's harmful. I think that it's better if everyone's rights are exactly the same. And everyone, if you look at that, the very basic of that is that you have the right to do anything you want to do as long as you don't harm anyone else. How often have we heard that? But if we look at government, they're so busy now trying to prevent people from doing bad things, and that's where I get the barbed wire in heaven idea, that they're taking away vast rights from vast groups of people to try to prevent anything bad from happening. Well, you could pass one law and say, nobody do anything bad, and it would achieve the same ridiculous result, because what's bad? You know, that varies from time to time. So I think we've gone too far the way things are right now in trying to force people to do this and not do this and do this and not do that. And we've got a government that's bullying us and is sucking the economic sap out of our economy. This country right now is behind only one other country as far as the percentage of the population that's in prison. The number one country is Russia, then there's us, and then there's South Africa. That really says something. And you see in the news, I get a small town newspaper from my old hometown in Pennsylvania, they're building more prisons. We know in Texas they're building tons of prisons. And we all know who's benefiting, at least from the contracting jobs. Certainly the concrete contractor happens to be one of the guys that passed a law to build new prisons. I think that's real interesting. Of course, some people have the idea of privately run prisons for profit. That's not really the answer. That's treating the symptom. I believe in that over government prisons, but it's still not the answer. I think we've got far too many people in jail right now. There's far too many laws. I got a speeding ticket the other day, so maybe I'm a little prejudiced there, but to me, I don't see the difference. I mean, the cop was very nice about it and everything. What is the difference between a guy driving up behind you with his flashing lights, stopping you, he's wearing a gun, he can use it any time, and taking money from you? What's the difference between that and in the days of Robin Hood, the highwaymen that would just stop travelers and take money from them? Yeah, we dress it up real nice. The guy's real polite, and we've got this big system where he gives me a ticket, and I've got to mail it in, and I can write a check. What's the difference? He has the right to stop me and take money from me indirectly under threat of force. I don't think that's right. I think if I hurt someone because I've gone too fast on the freeway and gotten into an accident, well, it doesn't matter if I've gone too fast or not. If I'm responsible for hurting someone, then I have to pay the price. Or my insurance company does, and then indirectly I do because my rates go up or they cancel my insurance or something. That's the way I see it running. When you get into preventing things from people from ever doing anything bad, the only way to really do that is to lock everyone up. I don't think any of us want that. We see people talking about take back Texas. Well, really both sides, the people that want to save the warblers and save the environment, I think they have good intentions, and the other people want to be able to use their property that they paid for and not have it become worthless. I know of one instance in California, a guy bought some marshland, and it was useless and not on the, not benefiting anyone. Whether you look at the taxes or nothing being built there, it's just marshland. Well, this guy got a plan approved to fill it in and build some apartments there. There always need apartments in growing cities. San Diego's growing just like Austin. And so he was going to build some apartments. Well, the Sierra Club came in and got a court injunction that this guy couldn't build anything on his land. So he put a fence around it. He said, well, I still have to pay taxes on it, but I can't build anything. It's useless, so maybe it's a write-off. Or at least he could afford to do that. I'd go bankrupt. I'd let the bank take it back or something. Well, the Sierra Club didn't like that either because they wanted to go in there and observe some birds or something. So they got another court order for him to take the fence down and let them in. Well, he said, okay, I'll let you in, but then I have to have insurance because if you break your leg, then I've got to pay for it. Well, they got another injunction. He had to let them in for free, and if any of them got hurt, he was going to be liable anyway. I like it better if you want to conserve things. Look at the Nature Conservancy. They get donations from corporations and individuals, and they buy land or they get land donated. And then they do whatever they want with it. They have land that they don't let anybody on. They have land that they only let scientists on, and they have land that anybody can go on for a small fee. And you can take tours and you can camp on it and whatever. And they decide, it's their land, they decide what's going to be done with it. Now, why can't the Sierra Club do that? Why can't some of these other environmentalists do that? Why do they have to push other people around? I think that's the right way. If you want to restrict what somebody can do with their land, the person has to be compensated. It's their land. They own it. Well, there's a question about that. Can you really own land nowadays? I'm on land right now that I supposedly own, but if I stop paying my taxes, they're going to take it away from me. If somebody can just walk in and take something away from you, I don't think you really own it. And I think that's wrong. I think property taxation is wrong. In fact, if we look at it, I think one of the reasons we're having problems is because government, the very basis of government to be able to take things from people, is just wrong. I think that maybe, and I don't mean in this case taking a gun away from somebody who's shooting people. I'm talking about the fact that no matter what you do, there's a level of taxation on it. And here again, they call it a sales tax. It's really a purchase tax. You pay the tax. They call it a corporate tax. There's no such thing as a corporate tax. You pay the tax. Corporation just collects it. And they've got to hire people to keep track of what they have to pay. And so, things cost you more. You're paying, if you work, you're paying for everything government does. And so, except what they borrow from the future, and then you're paying interest on that. I think in the society that I foresee that there's a better way of doing it. That government, like any other business, if they really truly provide a service, they should be able to bill you for it. And they shouldn't have any more rights than the car dealership I bought my car from or the barber that cuts my hair. That they could send you a statement, let's say if the tax year begins when it does now, and let's say April 15th, that if they want their taxes on April 15th, January 1st they send you a statement and they say, last year we provided this level of service in these, let's say, 30 major areas: defense, courts, police, environment, whatever areas you care to name. You could probably list 30 just as easily as I could. And 30 is just an arbitrary number. I'm just trying to build a picture of one way it could be done. And then they could even say, based on the level of service we think you get, which we are judging by your income, to maintain this level of service, here's how much you would owe in each of these 30 areas. And what you would do is decide in each area how much you wanted to pay. Let's say you really like what they were doing in defense. You could pay more there. Let's say you didn't want to contribute to environmental programs. You could put 0 in there. And you could even add in your own areas if you wanted to. And I think we have the technology that everybody could just fax those in or send it in with your check, and they could process them. And then they would come out on April 15th and say, here's how much money we collected this year for every one of these areas. Some people might choose to pay nothing. Life isn't that fair. There's a lot of people who pay nothing now and get a lot out of what society has to offer just by loopholes, they call them. In this case, it would reduce the level of service, and people could persuade each other and say, hey, wait a minute, Joe, you're bragging about not paying any taxes, but because of that, we're not getting our roads fixed, or any other area that the government might be involved in might not be the level we'd want. And people who could benefit from those, like Perot did, propose the programs that he could benefit from, might even go on TV and try to persuade people to give more in these areas. Now, this might sound pie in the sky, and maybe to an extent from where we are today it is, but I think something like this is really doable, and I think it's the kind of thing, if we aspire to it, we'll have a freer society. We won't have people pushing us around all the time, and you certainly won't have groups that are able to use government to take money from us to further their own cause and line their own pockets, because government wouldn't be able to do that. Okay, back to my other page here. There's a principle that I like to use in life of just how I picture things. And it comes from a method of self-defense, a Japanese method called Aikido. And the way I understand it, Aikido has an imaginary area called the dynamic sphere. That's an area around you within which you can control what happens, or at least you have influence over what happens. You strive to have everything within your sphere be as calm and pleasant as possible. Anything outside the sphere you don't much care about, or you don't spend much time thinking about. And in, of course, the combat, the martial arts way, the way they handle it is if someone brings a disruptive influence into your sphere, in other words, they try to punch you in the nose, you use the minimum effort to guide that disruptive force back out of the sphere where it can't harm you. And in fact, the way they perform Aikido, they try to show the opponent the futility of this kind of disruptive force. Well, I think we can apply the same philosophy in our lives and in business and in your love life, wherever, that you try to keep disruptive influence, you guide them back away from you and where they can't harm you, or you just avoid them. And any other force, you just kind of deal with it in a way that it's not going to harm you, and it goes back out of your life. I even have a painting on my wall that I think describes this. And this particular duck is sunbathing with a drink next to him. And he has his sunglasses on, he's stretched out on his towel. But around him are 4 alligators. And the alligators, one of them has a mouth open, but the other ones are just kind of looking at him. Now, I'm not sure what the artist meant by that, but I look at that painting, and I have it on my wall, because I think to a great extent our attitude affects how much of a target we are for these disruptive influences. And the way I look at that is I like to be the duck where even with alligators around, if you're relaxed and you're happy, they generally leave you alone. I think that's true in life. I think the bullies in life and the people that like to push their weight around are looking for a target. They're not looking for somebody that might hurt them. I think any of you that have taken any self-defense know that they always tell you to walk confidently, even if you're in a dangerous area, because the predators among us are looking for someone who walks like they're afraid and timid. And that's true in business, that's true in the workplace, it's true I think in romance. I can't think of an exception to it, that there are many people around who are just unconsciously looking for a target. And if you don't let yourself be that target, they'll generally pass over you and get on with someone else. They won't even bother you. Okay, slightly different subject here. We jump around. I think part of having a free mind is to be aware of the assumptions that you make. That as you go from day to day, you're assuming certain things. And I think it's proper to assume, but I think you need to question your assumptions, because when you do, I think it makes you more aware, and you tend to change these as it's appropriate. Anyway, there's some assumptions, like the sun will rise tomorrow, that we just make, because if the assumption's wrong, our whole life is going to change. And I think you can, if you're aware of this about assumptions, and I'm going to go into some examples, then I think you tend to appreciate life a little bit too. One set of assumptions I think we see is what's expected of you, what kind of behavior, what level of service at work, what kind of responses in romance or just as you walk down the street are expected of you. And I think a lot of people try to live up to what they think is expected of them. Maybe not even by anyone present, maybe by their parents when they were growing up, or maybe they just have their own theories about the way they're expected to behave. And I think if you question those expectations periodically, then you come to certain realizations. Like one, probably the biggest one that I came to realize in life was that I was brought up very strictly to believe that if someone criticized you, especially an authority figure, then that was correct and you had to take some corrective action based on the criticism. But if someone paid you a compliment, they were only trying to be polite. Now think of what position that puts someone in. If those are your assumptions about life, you can't accept a compliment. And how many times have you talked to someone and said, oh, you know, I like that shirt, and they say, oh, I've had this for years. Some mitigating statement rather than, oh, thanks. I mean, that's the best response, because if you make that response, you're accepting the compliment. Somebody else liked this shirt, or even if I don't like the shirt much, someone liked it. You know, I made somebody happy. So that's how your assumptions can a lot of the time get in your way. You know, assumptions about what you're supposed to do if someone gives you an order. That got in a lot of people's way in Vietnam and other wars where they were ordered to do things that they didn't believe in, and it caused a breakdown in their own self-image because they were doing things that they knew were wrong. So if you have a strong moral code, it's good to review that every now and then and just kind of make sure that your assumptions are sound there, and then also make sure that when someone tries to pressure you or trick you into doing something counter to your moral code, then you stay true to them. In life, listen as much as you can to other people and observe as calmly as you can what's going on and what people are really doing, because, as I said before, people are what they do. You can listen to somebody brag all day about the wonderful things they're going to do, but watch what they do. That defines the person. And from that, you can observe and say what you're going to take into your own life. And you should hold on to the things that you deem good and useful and discard the things that are bad or harmful. And over a period of time, you'll find your life is a lot better that way. I certainly have. I think recently, certainly in the last 10 years or so, we've seen what's happened as our so-called leaders in government have abandoned, really, those rules and have said, as Nixon very blatantly said, if the president does it, it can't be illegal. It's not illegal. And, of course, laws, we base our laws based on moral codes generally. And so basically what he's saying is if the president's doing it, it can't be immoral. And I think really starting before him and certainly after him very much, our so-called leaders have done very many immoral things. And I think they felt themselves to be answerable to a higher code. The end justifies the means, I think, is where we're living right now. It's okay to invade little defenseless countries if we're going to install our kind of government there. Well, I think that's a morally bankrupt position, and that we can encourage people, we can volunteer to go help them, but when we're forcibly taking money from working citizens in this country and shipping it in by the carloads and the plane loads overseas to some other dictator or something just because our dictator likes their dictator, we've lost our moral compass. A lot of people look to our leaders for examples, and they say, well, if he can do it, I can do it. If it doesn't apply to him, it doesn't apply to me. I'd say that's down to even the basics. I'd say, why do our legislators, why are they exempt from getting speeding tickets? And why can they get parking tickets fixed? If we're going to have such things as speeding tickets and parking tickets, they should be as answerable as anyone else. Even another policeman. Policemen don't give each other speeding tickets. I say BS, man. If there's such a thing, if there's going to be such a thing, it should apply to all. I think we'd see them go away if that was true. At least we'd see that stupid 55 speed limit go away. But I was watching a show on ACTV this morning where the guy was talking about closing our borders. Did you ever wonder, and here again, using the inquiring free mind to examine the assumptions, that people are questioning immigration into this country only from Mexico, or generally from Mexico and maybe Haiti. They don't look, I don't hear anybody complaining about excess immigration from Great Britain or from Canada or France. Why is that, I wonder? The only theory I have is that the countries that you hear them complaining about, the immigrants from those countries are very low income and generally do work that is done by union people, and these people aren't union. I think the unions, and to the extent that they influence government, that's a very big reason why we hear people complaining about immigration. And again, about calling things what they are, what is this about? I hear about Native Americans. What we used to call Indians, and now they call Native Americans, aren't native here either. They came here, all the archaeology shows, from across the Bering Straits. And, you know, all of us are descended from immigrants. And I would say even the so-called Native Americans, their descendants immigrated here. So this is a country made of immigrants, and we thrived the most during the periods when our borders were most open. So I'd kind of like to close on this thought, that our minds, if you look at the world, to our knowledge, our minds are the most precious possession that the human being has. It's the only thing on this scale that no other being that we know of possesses. And I think the way to aspire to a better society, and certainly a better life on our own scale, just as individuals, as people, ourselves, is to free our minds and use them to the greatest good, as however you define good. So again, thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I appreciate any comments you have. And until the next show, be sure and keep your mind free.